Welcome to the 24th episode of Kabbalistic Mystic, the podcast for the Western seekers, where we explore the tree of life and the ancient Hebrew wisdom as the lost spiritual heritage of the West. Years ago, Ram Dass came out with his book, Be Here Now, and it was an immediate sensation. And concepts like be present, concepts like you're not really who you think you are, were really revolutionary at that particular time. And I think one of the reasons why the book succeeded so much was not only because of the beautiful way in which it was presented, and it's absolutely a landmark in New Age literature. And I recommend that if you don't have this book, please do buy it or get it from the library if you can, and read it. It will impact you. And he did a great job introducing the backstory at the beginning. Now, again, the success of this book was not just because of the great job he did in terms of laying out the book, and it's just like a really different book. But I think it was also because there was hunger, or thirst, should I say, in the West for spirituality. There's this feeling that spirituality was hijacked by the three major religions. If you want to be spiritual in the West, you kind of have to be a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew. And that wasn't necessarily the case. People wanted to connect with their spiritual being because we are spiritual beings. And Ram Dass sort of gave them a particular gate, a particular way to relate to themselves. But a lot of people did not relate to that type of information. It was considered woo-woo. It was sort of like right brain, if to use a common term, type of approach. Very feely, not very logical. And I do think that here in the West, we require something that is a little bit more rooted in logic. And that's what I'm about to do in this episode. I'm about to give you, it's the tip of the iceberg, so the edge of the fork type of thing, but I'm about to introduce you to the true nature of reality. Now, those of you who listened to all the episodes until now, the idea was mentioned before. But I'm going to deep dive today. And the way I'm going to look at it is it's going to be a red pill. So I want to sort of warn you that once you swallow that pill, there's no way back. You would not look at the world the same ever again. So if you're ready to change your perception in terms of how reality works, the true nature of reality, if you're ready for that, keep on listening. If you're not, well, this will be a time to take the blue pill and, I guess, stop this podcast. All right, let's begin. You are living a personally tailored and infinitely unique hero's journey experienced in a 5-sensory illusion created by your mind. This is a statement that every once in a while I tell my wife, and I try to convey this shocking truth to her, and yet she basically just shrugs her shoulder skeptically and completely ambivalent to the dramatic significance of what I'm saying. And instead she's saying, and why should I care? And her tone is sort of like pragmatic and disinterested. And then she adds something like, well, if it's not too much for your enlightened, unique mind, would you experience the sensory illusion of taking out the garbage? It's trash night. And I sigh at her smirky remark because she is wiser than me, as clearly evident. And the reason she's wiser than me is because, unless absolutely required for her work in the world, she couldn't care less about the operational mechanism behind any aspect of reality. And instead, she cuts directly to action by gauging her intuition. If a theory resonates with her, she goes with it. If it doesn't, she moves on without analyzing it to shreds. She uses healthy reasoning in the process. But when a concept fails to pass the test of her rationale, she doesn't try to conclude why. Instead, she's just gracefully and effortlessly flows forward without the need to satisfy the intellectual curiosity that is burning in me, in her husband's mind. Now, if you're like her, you might find parts of this episode, or this entire podcast really, to be somewhat superfluous. Because after all, one learns how to ride a bike by sitting on it and pedaling, not by geeking out on the laws of dynamics. And I understand that. But I want to remind you, however, that it does help to know how the gears work and how to change a tire if you do plan on climbing some serious hills. Because I, on the other hand, and I suspect you as well, most of my listeners, believe that for everything to function, it must have a mechanism. And I derive immense joy from exploring it. For any hypothesis to pass the towering gates of reason, it must resonate with a complex structure of the functional universe as we know it. Spirituality, yes. Vagueness, yes. Chaos, yes. But only when it does not directly conflict with what was already widely accepted as objective verity. Truth be told, I experience all mystery, even spirituality, even God, with the inner knowing that one day it will all make perfect sense, because everything must. It's kind of a disease, really. I'm obsessed. It's why I love Kabbalah. It offers a unified theory for everything. When I say everything, I really actually mean everything. Let me give you a list of the things I think that Kabbalah sort of tells us about, right? Let's see. It offers us a very unique theory about human sexuality. It offers us a complete new revolutionary theory about psychodynamic theory. It actually debunks existing psychodynamic theory, and we're going to, whatever we're going to talk about today is going to do a little bit of that. It talks about how the human body can heal itself. It offers a whole theory around the structure of consciousness. And really, I shouldn't be saying theory, because what it does, it explains how it is. One more thing it does a lot more, but another thing it does, it describes the entire structure of the non-physical world, the non-physical universe, how it works after you die. It's not the only one. The Tibetan Buddhism does that too. There's a book called the Book of the Dead that describes the various stages between incarnations. But Kabbalah, what I love about Kabbalah is that it offers the Western version of Be Here Now. It basically comes and tell you, here's how it works. And that's why I love it. Now, exploration of consciousness is no different than the whole bike analogy that I've given you. It's not necessarily required to understand how consciousness works, as I'm constantly reminded by the fruitful existence of my better half. But gaining familiarity with the existing structure of human consciousness and obtaining a basic understanding of how its various parts communicate with each other will help the avid explorer, you, on his or her journey of self-realization. You cannot become an adept seeker without understanding consciousness and how it works, without understanding the true nature of reality. So if I'm going to do a good job today, you will not be bored, and you'll walk away with a deeper awareness of your own sense of existence. Not just intellectually, but also experientially. You will know how to practically look at the world from a whole different perspective. So let's go back to that introductory statement that I made to my wife in the beginning. And to dive into it, I want you to consider the following scenario. You wake up and you find yourself on an operating table. And you stare at the ceiling for a bit and you're confused. There's doctors in white robes. They buzz around you with bloody gloved hands. And you're like, what the fuck's going on? There's this viscous cloud of anxiety in your chest. You really feel nothing other than that anxiety, being conscious that you're in an operating room and your thoughts are running wild. What am I doing here? I'm the patient, and will my insurance cover this? Now, finally, you muster the courage to lift your head and look down. And to your horror, you see your thigh sliced open and a surgeon's hand is buried deep inside. Is that my thigh? Your mind asks. I feel nothing, so it cannot be. And yet, here it is. It's connected to my hip, connected to my torso, connected to my... Oh, shit, this is my thigh. You lose consciousness. Study your hand for a minute. I want you to take your hand and I want you to look at it. Your fingers, the fingernails, the fine hairs on the knuckles. In my case, they're kind of freakishly dark. Middle Eastern, what do you want? The lines on your palm. Study your hand, the color of your skin. Look at it. Your hand is physically present, no doubt, but only as a mental construct. It is a projection of your subconscious mind. So is this podcast and my voice and the chair you're sitting on, or maybe the car you're driving in, or your children, the food that you're eating, every person that you ever met, every tree you ever touched, every flower you ever smelled, this entire planet, the sun itself, this whole galaxy, they only exist in the mind, which brilliantly creates a virtual reality that is experienced through your senses. Now, those very senses are also experienced mentally. When you taste something, when you touch something, when you smell something, it's just a mental construct of that sense, as evident by the surgeon's ability to operate on parts of your body while you are fully awake. Well, not fully awake. You are consciously fully awake, but your thigh is not awake. Now, in the example I've given, the anesthetics simply block the nerves that connected your thigh to your brain. So more accurately, if we talk about it from a Kabbalistic perspective, it cuts the connection between your conscious mind and the portion of the subconscious mind which mirrors your physical body back to you. The subconscious mind, I'll say it again, mirrors the conscious mind. And it mirrors it with everything physical around us. Your physical body specifically is an exact mirror of your own conscious awareness. Just like a mirror, everything is reflected back in physical form. The nerves, which are responsible for the mind-body connection that were severed by the anesthetics, are the physical reflection of the connection between the conscious and the subconscious portions of your mind. In other words, we're looking at your hand, or the chair, or the night sky. You're not looking outward. You're looking inward. You're looking into your subconscious mind, where everything mentally exists in physical form and expressed in a sensory activity for the conscious mind to perceive it. But why, you might ask? This is bullshit. My hand's real. It feels real. I know it's real. Besides, if I was right next to you and my hand only exists in my mind, how come you're going to feel it if I smack you? So some of you might have the urge to actually do it. I understand. I've given you a big fat red pill to swallow like the Matrix. And if it clicked for you, there is no going back. And once it does, that's it. Now, remember, answering your question, telling me this is bullshit, my hand is real. Remember that I alternated in this explanation between the term the mind and your mind. Your subconscious mind, responsible for creating this illusory experience, has several parts. One of them, we'll call it the objective subconscious, is collective in nature. It's responsible for creating an objective reality, an indisputable experience that is governed by what we call the laws of nature. In other words, it is objectively and collectively shared among all living beings, and hence the term, by the way, collective consciousness. That is the part that is responsible for me to also see your hand, and if you smack me, to also feel it. But I will always look at it as your hand, and you'll always look at it as my hand that is yours. Why? Because of this subjective subconscious. We'll get to that in a second. Let's stay with the objective subconscious for just one more minute. The objective subconscious, again, is responsible for creating an objective truth for all of us. Otherwise, this game, whatever we're a part of, is not going to be real. And I've already hinted that everything that is intangible is mirrored in the physical world by Mother Nature in physical form. And so a good demonstration of the objective subconscious is the way we experience air. All living being must use it in some form or another. And the same air is shared among all. That is an indisputable reality, right? When someone might be breathing a heavily polluted air and another person gets to inhale the healing breeze of the ocean, the objective experience is the same. We have air, we're breathing. Cut it off, we die. Now, the air that we're breathing, the experience that we're having while breathing it, that is a subjective experience. And when it comes to the manner with which we subjectively experience air, all hell breaks loose. And I'm going to illustrate that literally with an example. Imagine you're trapped in a flatulently contaminated elevator. Somebody farted with some other poor souls. Now, everybody's going to be experiencing that differently. Someone might feel like they're about to faint, avoiding breathing altogether. That's me. Someone might easily ignore the troubling scent, having changed 3 nasty diapers that same morning. That's probably like my neighbor who runs a daycare. And another victim of this horrible act might not even notice it because maybe he's consumed with an upcoming dreadful meeting with his boss. And lastly, the inconsiderate aggressor might actually enjoy the transcending aroma because some people just do. And so you have 4 different people, and they all experience this air in the elevator subjectively. These significant differences in the way we experience our physical reality are governed by another part of our subconscious mind. We're going to call that the subjective subconscious. And that part cooks a unique physical experience tailored just for us on top of the objective experience that we spoke about. So if all the laws of nature, gravity is a great example for an objective truth. It's always there. Even a baby, newly born, just minutes after birth, resting in his mother's arm, experiences gravity in the exact same way. It's an illusion. It's still a projection of its subconscious mind, but it works perfectly. Because these laws of nature, the laws of this of the objective minds, cannot be overridden. It's just the way it is. But the subjective subconscious, that is very unique. It is unique only to you. It is changing the way you experience your physical reality because it cooks a very unique physical experience, like I said, that is tailored just for you. It's an unparalleled physical perception, and it's influenced by a very complex set of mental factors. For example, physiological triggers, childhood trauma, desires, judgments, preconceived notions, lessons you must learn, luck, and much, much, much more. There is so many factors. It's really unbelievably intelligent. So many factors that go into what will construct your subjective experience of the truth. Now, here's a good way to exercise the function of the objective subconscious that we spoke about before. That is the collective part. Okay. Now, listen to what I say and do it. And if you're driving, please do not do that. But if you're not driving, this is a perfect opportunity to do this. I want you to close your eyes and I want you to focus on your breath until you achieve a relatively decent state of relaxation. So pause this podcast and go ahead and do that. And those of you who are not pausing, let's just take 3 big breaths. All right. Now, before you're opening your eyes, I want you to imagine that you have an invisible helmet and it was just placed over your head. Now, this helmet is a special device. It's allowing you to experience a virtual reality that was created just for you. And when you're going to open your eyes, the portion of your mind that is processing all sensory information will detach from the other parts that process and analyze them. In other words, you're going to step outside of yourself and you're going to be observing yourself experiencing reality. Now we're going to count to 0. 3, 2, 1. Open your eyes. Everything you see around you is a projection created by the invisible helmet that you're wearing. You're in a virtual reality game. Look at your hands, wiggle your fingers. They were created by this helmet so you can see them, so you can feel them, so you can move them the way you do with the power of your mind. Touch the chair. The feeling of the fabric, the wood, or the metal is transmitted to your mind by the helmet. So are the sounds that you hear, my voice, your entire body was created by the helmet to provide you with a tangible sensory vehicle for your awareness. In fact, the entire world around you, all of it, is nothing but vibrations translated into an auditory, visual, olfactory, I think it's called when you smell, gustatory, and tactile sensations by this invisible helmet. It, gives you your 5 senses, and without those 5 senses, you would experience nothing. Did you get it? Those of you who do smoke marijuana, and I live in a place where it's legal, I do not want to advocate illegal activity, but those of you who have considered all the implications and do that every once in a while, it might help you doing this exercise while on marijuana. And I'll dive into marijuana in a different episode. It is a tool like many other tools that we have. And it's a very unique tool, but it does allow you to repave the connection between the mind and the body. So doing an exercise like that while being altered by marijuana, it could be very powerful. But again, if you're not smoking, it's not something I necessarily recommend. In fact, there's nothing like the experience of reality purely. And we'll talk more about that in a different episode. But I'm telling you, as soon as you realize that everything that you're experiencing is really an illusion, it's fucking awesome. I'll tell you a secret. The adept explorer of consciousness, which is a term I really want to coin. We are explorers of consciousness. I think the term seeker sort of got like this spiritual woo type of connotation to it. But the adept explorer of consciousness never really takes off their invisible helmet. He or she always knows that they're living within a physical illusion, especially when clear-minded. And that makes all the difference. And I'll explain why in a minute. But still, many of you, I'm sure, scream, it's called a reality. It's real. And true, it is real as a physical reality can get. There is no other more real physical reality. And yet, as mystics, adept meditators, toddlers would know, but will rarely tell you, it is not the only type of reality available for you to experience. Knowing and remembering that the physical reality is completely created by your subconscious mind will serve you as a fundamental truth with which you understand how you are impacted by the world. Everything will be based on that. And it'll help you understand how other parts of your mind have generated a subjective reality. And to that subjective reality we call ego, that is the source of all your suffering. By understanding this as a fundamental cornerstone for my own personal transformation, I can tell you that I've healed a lot. I've healed my body. I suffered from a lot of allergies and asthma. Most of them, the vast majority, is gone. I've healed chronic anxiety that I had. I've healed the food obsession that I had. And I got to doing what I love, which is this, not just this podcast, writing about consciousness, exploring it. I'm living my dream life. Sure, not everything is great. It's not like I don't have suffering, but even the suffering I'm having is from a whole different perspective. I have my invisible helmet, and it makes a big difference. And there's a reason for this big difference. But before we get there, I'll give you another example. Now, this example is going to be to experience, this exercise is going to be to experience the subjective subconscious. So we spoke about the objective subconscious, which is shared among all of us, and we have the invisible helmet exercise for that. But to experience the subjective subconscious, do this. Take a partner. You're going to need a partner for this. And jointly select a physical object or a being, like a pet, a piece of furniture, somebody you know, a piece of food. And I want you to sit and for 5 minutes write a description of it. And ensure that you're not limiting yourself to the visual sense, right? For example, how does the object makes you feel, not just how does the object looks. Now do it individually. Just write a description of the object, everything you can think of. And do it individually yet simultaneously without seeing what the other person does. Then I want you to read it to each other out loud. Now what you'll notice is some similar adjectives and sensations are mentioned in both readings, but in most cases your subjective perception of the object is quite different. And that is because the object, that is the collective objective perception of it, of the object, is being filtered through your own subjective subconscious, which colored it with your own version of what is known to be true. Okay? And this is why a particular movie is going to be unbelievable to one person and is going to be the most boring movie ever to another. This is why we listen to a song. And that song, it's just like, wow, you're crying, you have tears in your eyes. And another person's like, this is just like, I can't believe how you like that. This is why, even more simple, this is why, we're standing with our partner in front of someone and they talk to us and they say something and our partner gets triggered and we don't. Subjective reality. That's the subjective subconscious that, like we said before, has a very complex criteria to color your experience with your own version of the truth, your subjective truth, which sits upon the objective truth. Your perception of gravity will always be a perception of gravity. But some of us sometimes might feel a little heavier. Some of us might feel lighter. When we're in a good mood, we feel lighter. It's almost like we're defying gravity a little bit. That's the portion that's subjective. Now, that's a lot to digest, so let's summarize this a little bit. Your physical reality is an illusory reality, your own individualized Truman Show. So is everybody else's. It is mentally and objectively projected to your conscious awareness by your subconscious mind, which seasons your unique perception with an additional layer of your own subjective truth. And as a last piece of this summary, please do not fart in an elevator with other people. It's very unkind. In fact, even if you're alone in the elevator, when you step out, it's still there. It can be, however, a very advanced way of testing your invisible helmet. Now, it's okay if you're not experientially in line quite yet. Just keep practicing. If you got it, if you experience that sense of the objective truth about the true nature of reality, practice it as often as you can. You've already swallowed the pill. The seed have been planted. It's only a matter of time before it pops out of the ground. So even if you didn't get it, it's going to happen. And the question comes, why do we care? Which is exactly what my wife asked. Why does it make a difference? And here comes the number one rule or truth of Kabbalah. What this means is that we are all the same being experiencing itself into our illusory reality at the same time. Me, you, your mother, your father, your children, your boss, your biggest nemesis, Donald Trump, Beyonce. We are all the same being. Notice I'm not saying we're connected. We are one being. There is only one being that is mentally experiencing itself, sort of like a computer that is multitasking trillion and Googles of time at the same time and creating its own mental game by setting a set of rules that is governed by a particular portion of the mind that you have no access to, that is called the subconscious mind, that creates this objective reality, and on top of it, a subjective experience of that reality, experienced as the entire physical universe. And it gave you, that entity, it gave the portion, the leaf of consciousness within itself, free will. You can do whatever you want. But it doesn't mean that you're not a part of that entity. And it doesn't matter what you're going to do, you will go back to becoming that entity again. Religious people call it God. Some call it Mother Nature. Now we understand why, because the experience, the entire experience of this entity is in nature. It's the known universe. You cannot experience anything physical without experiencing that entity. But it's the same freaking entity. I am God. You are God. We are all God. We're all the same entity. There is only one. That is the oneness. And when you really truly get that, when you walk in the street, it doesn't matter who you meet, you realize for the first time that every time you approach someone with anything less than unconditional love, it is because there is something about yourself that you do not love, because they are you and you are them. And in fact, the entire purpose of this game, this illusion that was created by this unbelievably intelligent entity, is for us to experience ourselves and reach the point where we love ourselves fully. And when we love ourselves fully, We feel love towards every other being on the face of the planet. Let it be a plant, let it be a cockroach, let it be an ant, a mosquito, and any other person. There is nothing that we feel other than love. It feels like your heart is huge. It feels warm. Your eyes are just glowing. You're smiling all the time. You're in bliss. It's very hard to maintain that state of consciousness continuously. It's like onion. It's within. You have to remove the layers one by one. But the more you do it, the more easily you dive into that state of consciousness. The less anger, the less grief, the less anxiety, fear that you feel. Your emotions are sort of like circling around the drain. And the more you're going through your psychospiritual process, the more you're getting close to the only state of consciousness experienced by that being, by that entity that has creating this illusory reality. Unconditional love. It is the only emotion that exists. Everything else is a derivative. And we'll talk more about emotions in the future. And we'll practice various ways of learning to feel our emotions. But for now, I want to stick with the topic of this episode, the true nature of reality. Somebody might hear all this and say, you know what? If that's the case, what the fuck do I care? I'm just going to go kill people. Well, this is where the law of karma comes in. Everything that you do comes back to you. And if you inflict pain, if you're doing anything bad, you are creating karma for yourself, and you will experience pain and suffering in direct relation to the suffering that you've caused. The eradicator of karma is forgiveness, mainly to yourself, but very importantly to others. If you are 100% forgiving yourself for everything bad that you've ever done, you will be forgetting other people as well. Because you are them and they are you. And so we are here, each and every one of us, in our own unique Truman Show for that one particular reason, in order to understand our own lesson. Your lesson is something that repeats itself in your life. Every time you kind of see a pattern keeps coming back, both on the macro level and on the micro level. That's a lesson. I'll give you an example for a small little tiny lesson within the illusion that my wife has been struggling with as of late. Or I shouldn't even say struggling, has been experiencing. For some weird reason, for the last 3-4 weeks, she had to throw away a lot of food. Something didn't work out. I made soup and it got, too salty. She wanted a particular milk drink and too much cinnamon was spilled in it, like a significant. I'm talking about like the cap was, opened and like the whole thing spilled in it. All kind of things like that. 4 or 5 occasions where she had to throw. She hates throwing food. We both hate throwing food. Why? Because it's such a waste. There's people who are hungry, blah, blah, blah. You know the story. And yet it keeps happening to her. Not to me, to her. And so she stops and reflects. Okay, what's the lesson? And she got to the conclusion that she has sort of poverty mentality, being growing up with someone who was born and grew up in the Depression era. My wife is in her 50s. Her mother is in her late 80s. She grew up in the Depression era. You did not throw food away. You ate everything that was on your plate. And I'm not saying it's okay to throw food, but I'm saying there is a particular distortion to the other side as well. Sometimes you just got to let go of something, and it's okay. And so there's a particular experience that is happening intelligently through the subconscious mind that is causing us to experience something and to learn a micro lesson. And we figure out the lesson, we move on. Right? So a way to solve that is not, the intellectual understanding is not enough. It's not enough to say, oh, now I get it. Okay, well, I get it. I grew up with a mother in the Depression era. You still feel the feeling. So how do we do that we don't feel the feeling? Well, you can't battle what's happening on the subconscious level. That is the emotion, because the emotion is in the body. The body, remember, anything physical is the subconscious. And emotions are all physical. We feel them in our body. Right? You have to battle that. You have to address that. You have to mitigate that with something else physical, with a sensation. And so what she started doing is that every time she gets to the point where, oh, I have to throw food, she throws away, first of all, we have a compost pile, so we put that in the compost pile so it doesn't feel that bad. But even if we have to, there's just no way to avoid it. We have to throw it away. She does this she makes it a ritual. She makes it a particular intention. She throws it away and says, I'm throwing this away knowing that I'm doing this to relieve myself from this perception of hunger, that I'm not going to have enough. It's fear. She's experiencing fear, which is the other side of the coin from love. The only reason we don't love someone is because we're afraid. This is why we hate our enemies. We're afraid of them. You don't hate somebody you're not afraid of. They're taking our jobs. We hate them. You're afraid they're taking your jobs. Oh, we hate them because they're killing us. Israelis will tell you, I'm an Israeli. They will tell you, oh, Palestinians are killing us. Well, yeah, we're afraid of them. Well, guess what? They're afraid of us. We have big tanks. We have big airplanes. That's a whole topic. I'm not going to go into that right now. Actually, that's a worthy topic. We need an episode about the whole Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I'm being asked a lot by friends. So what do you think about that? Maybe I'll share my perspective with you. But the point is, everything that's happening to you in the physical world is a reflection of your subconscious mind. And as such, it is intelligently constructed and crafted. In other words, not only the impact of this true nature of reality that we've just talked about means that there's only one entity that thinks itself into existence, but also what it means is that everything happens for a particular reason. There is intelligence in the chaos. Every experience that you're undergoing, whether you're stuck in traffic, whether the particular item you went to the store for, they don't have it anymore, anything that happens to you, even cancer, even all the disease that I ever had, even if you can't figure it out and understand it, it's happening for a reason. Maybe it's a commitment that you made before you were born, so this is something you have to experience. Maybe it's karma. And there's a lot of different ways to let go of it. If you're having a hard time understanding this, read a book called and you want more scientific evidence. I mentioned this book, I think, in the first episode of this podcast. It's called The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot. It is a book in which it was written, I think, in 1994, many years ago. And he explains how the entire universe is essentially a five-sensory hologram. Okay? Now, quantum physics is sort of heading in that direction. We're realizing that, wow, everything emanates from one place. This theory explains everything, okay? Everything. This theory even explains the difference between Jews, religious Jews, who will tell you that the world exists only 5,777 years. They count the years from the day, the world was created in Genesis. To scientists who will tell you that the world exists billions of years. If everything is just an experience of this intelligent entity, then it can experience billions of years in a split second, because it's just thinking them into reality. If it's just thinking the world into existence, it can just fast forward the creation of the world. It doesn't even have to wait till it happens. It just thinks it. It thinks 4 billion years into existence in a nanosecond, right? Because The planet didn't have to form for 4 billion years before we came. It's just a thought. The Zohar, the most important book of Kabbalah, or at least considered the most important book, I don't necessarily think it is, says it's all one thought. It is all one being. Now, if you have a hard time accepting that, even if you had the experience, but you're having a hard time accepting that, maybe you're not a religious person, maybe you're really, really logical, maybe you're saying we are living in an illusion that is a computer program. Okay. That's okay. Believe in that. The experience stays the same. The rules stays the same. You don't have to know God. You don't have to know this being as a spiritual being. Just know that it's an illusion, and know that there's rules within the illusion, not just physical rules, laws of physics, but also a mechanism with which this reality functions. And it has to do with finding the love towards yourself, towards every being. And that is done by peeling the layers of what is called the primal wound. We all suffer from this primal wound. It's something that we are here to resolve. We'll talk about that more as well. But this is what you're here for. I promise you that as you go through the process, if not in this lifetime, then the next, you will get to an experience that is spiritual, because we are all spiritual beings. It's just impossible. Some of us call this God. Some of us connects with this as nature. Some of us connects with it as, the supreme being. Whatever. The great software, the matrix. Call it whatever you want. You're living in a matrix. But you're here, and you're here now, and make the best of it. Because it's not that simple. It's not like if you're going to kill yourself, you're going to come back in a second. You were privileged to be here, especially you, especially here, especially now. Because this planet, within the grand scheme of the illusion, our particular illusion and our particular portion of the universe, at this particular time, this is a very unique time. Every story experienced by this supreme entity has a beginning, middle, and end. It has a skeleton. You live at the end of the story. The story is supposed to be 6,000 years. We don't know what's going to happen at the end of 6,000 years. But Kabbalah tells us it's actually a 7,000-year journey. But after 6,000 years, it's like becoming a renaissance for humanity. Everything is just perfect. It's called the fourth density. Now, we are in year 5,777. So within the next 230 years, everything is about to change. Life will not be as we knew it. And we see it. We see it's happening. It's been, 150 years since the first person who psychoanalyzed himself? And look at the self-help industry now. Everybody is yearning to get to self-realization, to the top of the Maslow pyramid. Self-actualization, as Maslow calls it. We all want to actualize. And more people are realizing what this is about. Religion is crumbling. And this is all because we are living the end of the story. You want to be here now. You're here for a reason. If you've incarnated in this reality at this particular point, and if you're in 2017, and especially if you're listening to this freaking podcast, you're here for a reason. And I suspect that most of you know what it is. And those of you who don't know what it is, just have that deep sense of knowing that you're here for a reason. And maybe that reason is just to learn to love your mother or your neighbor, or to get over a particular fear, or to learn to love yourself so you can find a partner. I don't care. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm going to change the world by, whatever. Inventing, like finding the cure for autism, which, by the way, does not require a cure. I have a whole theory about that, but we'll save that to some other time. But the point is, this understanding of the true nature of reality is the basis for everything that you do in the world. There shouldn't be a day passing by when you're not asking yourself, why am I here? What do I want to achieve? Am I doing it? Am I stuck in a dead-end job and burning my days? What am I doing with my life? Why am I here for? What do I want to achieve? What it also means is that there is an entire different reality that can happen if you flow with a current. We've been taught, we've been indoctrinated to live in a particular way, to live with belongings, to live with, in one particular place, to have a job, to have education, to get a degree. If you haven't read Be Here Now, do it. Read his story in the beginning. Read it slow. He talks about that. Ram Dass is 85 now, I think. He's getting close to the end of his life. He catered to the baby boomers. Most of you, my listeners, some of you are baby boomers, I know, but most of you are not. You're Generation X, maybe Generation Y. Millennials, they have a whole different role. Each generation has its role. Baby boomers paved the way. Generation X is the transitional generation. Millennials accept, truths like be present, and you can still your mind, and, consciousness, all these things, we're all one. They accept that as given truths, especially in, educated areas, liberal educated areas. They want more. We are rapidly approaching a renaissance, a psychospiritual renaissance for humanity. This is why the unconscious is rising to power everywhere. Everywhere. We see it in Italy. We see it for a while now in Israel. In France, soon going to be election. Here in the US, Brexit. There's going to be a showdown. And that showdown is the crescendo of the story. And there's only one way to win. Not by violence, not by force. The winner has already been determined. The winner will be the one with his heart open. Probably also going to be the side that suffers more. Because they go together. Because suffering, as Buddhism tells us, is the way to purify in order to become open-hearted. In Judaism and Kabbalah, they tell you that there's only two emotions, love and fear. Love brings you closer to God, or to this entity that thinks itself into existence. The more you love unconditionally, the more you're it. And fear purifies you so that you can love. All right, before we leave today, before we end this episode, I want to I have a note for mental professionals that happen to listen to this section. Now, everybody else, this is a warning. I highly recommend you basically stop this section of the podcast, because you will get, most likely, you will get unnecessarily confused. But if you're a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a therapist, a psychoanalyst, or maybe you're an obsessive brainiac who ignores warning, keep listening, because I have to explain something. I got some bad news. From all my listeners, you're probably going to have the hardest time grasping the Kabbalistic blueprint of human consciousness. That is this true nature of reality. And I'm really sorry, but it's true. Most of you, not because you're not smart or that you don't have interest in the true mechanism behind the mystery of the mind, but precisely because you've chosen a career in this field, you will find it difficult. And this is why it's like teaching a manly man to pee sitting down. Some mental processes are too heavily ingrained. The intellectual, patriarchal framework of modern psychology with which you were indoctrinated and contaminated will keep popping back to confuse you like an energizing bunny on steroids. You have to remember that Kabbalah was received and documented when terms like consciousness, ego, mental case, subconscious did not exist. And so metaphoric, non-tangible terms were used. For example, empress or door for the subconscious, devil for the ego personality. It's the unconscious man. In order to modernly express this blueprint, one has to align it with current lingo, and thus the mental chaos begins, so to speak. Now, I'm telling you all this because some of you may have been triggered by my use of the term subconscious mind. And it's probably because it is commonly used, yet accurately, by the way, to describe what is otherwise called unconscious, which is also an inaccurate term. In other words, what's generally not in the focal awareness of our mind. So to clarify the linguistic ambiguity, I've been talking for 57 minutes now. I can feel that. To clarify this ambiguity, let's align on terminology. I'll quote a fellow Jew who has earned the dubiously impressive title of being the first to psychoanalyze himself, Sigmund Freud. Here's what he has to say, the maestro, on subconscious in his 1926 book, The Question of Lay Analysis. Sigmund Freud. If someone talks of subconscious, I cannot tell whether he means the term topographically to indicate something lying in the mind beneath consciousness, or qualitatively to indicate another consciousness, a subterranean one, as it were. He's probably not clear of any of it. The only trustworthy antithesis is between the conscious and unconscious. End of quote. Now, that's a very interesting statement coming from the person who coined the term himself, subconscious. He coined the term 33 years later in his book, by the way, Studies on Hysteria. But his point is well taken. Our awareness of any mental perception can only be either conscious or unconscious, quote unquote. And I'm going to use unconscious because I'm using his own language. One can say that the Kabbalistic concept of the subconscious mind lies in the mind beneath the conscious mind, and that Freud was unconscious, quote unquote, of the fact that the subconscious he himself titled was all around him. It was the very branch he was sitting on. The subconscious mind was the entire physical reality he experienced and considered separate from his consciousness, from consciousness which he studied. Simply put, he was too deep in the trees to see the forest. But he was the first one to realize that there was a forest. It's fucking ironic. It's like makes me laugh. He must be transforming in his grave. All right, let's summarize. In this podcast series, I'm using the following terms. The first term, when it comes to consciousness, right? The first one is the conscious mind. Now, this term is going to be used to describe all possible mental awareness, which is generally divided into two parts. The first one is our conscious awareness, which is our conscious thoughts, right? You're thinking right now, that's your conscious thought. That's the first part. Everything you're thinking and aware that you're thinking. The second part is the unconscious portion of our mental perception, which we will call the ego personality. At some point in our psychospiritual transformation, we become aware of our ego. And then a temporary transitional area of the conscious mind is being heavily used. We call that the superego. Now, the id, which you know from psychology, will be ignored altogether in this podcast because this is from a Kabbalistic perspective, mental desires fall under the ego personality, and physically induced urges, which are instincts, fall under the subconscious mind. Okay? Now, I doubt that I'll have to talk about fainting too much, but if I do, I'll say the term lost consciousness, like I did earlier in this episode. And you're already noticing that I'm avoiding using the term unconscious. I used it before to quote Freud, and when I used his language in the beginning of this definition, but overall, I don't want to use it, and I don't use it because it's an oxymoron. Because consciousness is all that exists, and therefore nothing is unconscious. There is nothing but consciousness. All right? Again, the conscious mind, two parts. One is the conscious awareness, the other one's the ego personality. And then we have the superego, which is the area that is conscious, but is also aware of the ego and judges it, which is a part of the conscious awareness, really. I told you it's going to be confusing. If you're not in the field, you shouldn't have listened. And if you are in the field, draw a map, hang it by the toilet. It'll help you eliminate the crap, so to speak. Now that's the first term, the conscious mind. Now let's talk about the second term, the subconscious mind. This term will be used to describe our entire perception of the physical reality, otherwise can be described as the known physical universe, which is more accurately should be described as the inner universe because it's inside of us. It will also be divided into two parts. The first one is the collective objective subconscious, otherwise known as the collective consciousness, which is our perception of Mother Nature and all her unbearable, unbreakable laws, which, coupled with the gift of free will, is the reason why God, quote unquote, allowed the Holocaust to happen, right? These laws are unbreakable. That's why things happen, because humans have free will and we do what we do, and it has to happen. God doesn't allow or not allow. He set the rules in motion through the subconscious mind, and that's it. We are to use them. Now, the other parts of the subconscious mind is the subjective subconscious, which is the individualized portion of our physical reality, experienced through our senses and perceived as our physical and emotional body. Simple. The conscious mind, the subconscious mind. Each one, two parts. It's simple, unless you're a shrink, in which case you're completely mentally screwed at this point. And that's really funny how that turned out. Thank you for listening today to Kabbalistic Mystic. I am working diligently to get my next podcast out. It's called 7 Fat Cows, in which I will do dream interpretation. And so I want to hear your dreams. Email me with your dreams. Go to batat.com or kabbalisticmystic.com and email me your dream. I'm going to pick some dreams and we're going to work them live. Not live, but we're going to work them within the podcast. Another thing I want to tell you is I'm writing a book about the true nature of reality, a book that explains human consciousness from a Kabbalistic perspective. And I do believe that the book has a power to make a revolution in the way we understand our psycho-spiritual reality and even the psychodynamic theory. What can help me, if you enjoyed this episode and you had in your mind to give a review, it will help me if you do, because by the time I send my proposals to agent, which should happen in the next couple of weeks, the more reviews I have, the better chance I have of the book being picked and published. So, a review on iTunes will be great. There's instructions on how to do that on kabbalisticmystic.com/review, I believe. And if not, just email me and I'll explain to you how. But it's on the website. Go and check that one out, or Google how to leave a review, a podcast review on iTunes. It's a little tricky. You have to search for the podcast name in order to leave a review. If it's just listed under your podcast, you're not going to see the review tab. It's kind of weird. I don't get that. From Spokane, Washington, this is Ovadia Batat, reminding you to always wear your invisible helmet. And I'm wishing you love in every moment.